That's what I look for all the time. When a quarterback throws a touchdown pass, I actually watch to see who he goes and celebrates with. Then a quarterback doing his six-shooter guns and pointing up in the crowd and doing all that other bullshit that's very self-promotional, but it's not about winning.
What happens when the greatest quarterback of all time decides to critique the next generation? Not their stats, not their skills, but the way they celebrate. Tom Brady isn't just a football legend. He's the face of winning in the NFL. 7 rings, unmatched longevity, the model of discipline. So when he talks, people listen. But this time, it's not about winning, it's about self-promotion. To him, those displays of emotion are rubbish. But here's the thing, he wasn't just talking about celebrations. Audiences quickly realized he was taking aim directly at black quarterbacks who've helped redefine what a QB looks like. Not just in play style, but presence.
What I do, I look for my offensive lineman every time. I went down and celebrated in the end zone with my teammates every time. I wanted everyone to feel like they were part of the success.
Names like Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson were quickly connected to Brady's words, even if he never named them himself. And just like that, what began as a critique of dance moves turned into a full-on culture war, one that exposed deep, uncomfortable truths about power, race, respect, and what leadership really means in today's NFL. Because underlying all of this is one pressing question. Is Brady protecting the traditions of the game, or gatekeeping who's allowed to define it? Strapped in. What you're about to hear isn't just about football. It's about the unspoken power dynamics that have shaped the league for decades, and the athletes who are finally pushing back. At first glance, it didn't seem like much. Just a legendary quarterback sharing his opinion about how the game is played. Or so we thought.
Run into the end zone and we're celebrating as a team. Because I think that's way more intimidating.
In a recent interview, Tom Brady spoke candidly, too candidly for some. He reflected on his years in the NFL, explaining that when he threw a touchdown, the celebration wasn't about him. I looked for my linemen. I celebrated in the end zone with my teammates. Everyone was part of the success. Fair enough. But then he kept going. Brady criticized today's quarterbacks for their over-the-top celebrations. He singled out the six-shooter motions, the finger-pointing, the dramatics aimed at fans and cameras alike. He didn't just disapprove, he dismissed it, flat out calling today's celebration culture rubbish. According to him, these moments send the wrong message. They spotlight the individual at the expense of the team. Worse, they create a precedent that younger players might copy, one that, in Brady's view, ruins the integrity of the game.
Quarterback doing his six-shooter guns and pointing up in the crowd and doing all that other bullshit that's very self-promotional, but it's not about winning.
It was that word, precedent, that sent alarms ringing, because fans quickly noticed something that Brady may not have realized. He wasn't criticizing all quarterbacks, just a certain type. His comments seemed laser-focused on the new wave of players coming into the league. Players like Shedeur Sanders, Deshaun Watson, and even Cam Newton in years prior. Quarterbacks who are bold, expressive, creative, not just in how they play, but in how they carry themselves on and off the field. He didn't call anyone out by name, but he didn't have to. The message was loud and clear. Suddenly, this wasn't about celebrations anymore. It was about control, about culture, about who gets to lead and how they're expected to act once they do. Brady's version of leadership? Silent pride, controlled emotion, the kind that makes headlines for perfect execution, not pointed fingers or post-touchdown swagger. But is that really the gold standard? Or just his personal preference? And a way to dismiss anyone who challenges it? As the clip of Brady's comments exploded on social media, the conversation quickly shifted from touchdowns to taboos. Fans weren't just talking about sports anymore. They were talking about image, identity, and an uncomfortable pattern that's played out in the NFL for years. A pattern that this time, Brady unknowingly brought right back into the spotlight. And the players he alluded to, they weren't about to stay quiet. It started with what sounded like harmless nostalgia. Tom Brady, the most decorated quarterback in NFL history, was reflecting on the game he helped define. His focus? Celebrations. More specifically, how he believes today's players are doing it all wrong. "When I threw a touchdown," Brady said, "I looked for my linemen. I went straight to the end zone to celebrate with the team. Then came the punchline." He referred to modern touchdown celebrations as rubbish, showboating, self-promotion, not about winning. On the surface, it seemed like a classic veteran take, an old-school legend defending what he sees as the true spirit of the game. But fans heard something else entirely. Brady didn't just comment on celebrations. He took aim, subtly but unmistakably, at the flashier athletes reshaping what an NFL quarterback can be. Players like Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson, whose post-touchdown flair has become just as iconic as their on-field performances. He never dropped names, but his message was obvious. Individual expression? Not his style, and apparently not welcome. That's when things really took a turn, because the conversation wasn't just about touchdowns anymore. It shifted to something bigger, something deeper. People started asking, why was Brady so uncomfortable with this new style of celebration? And what does it say about the standards applied to today's black quarterbacks? The question wasn't whether Brady hated dancing. The question became whether he was trying to control who gets to dance at all. Brady didn't name names, but the internet didn't need him to. The moment he criticized six-shooter moves and self-promotional celebrations, all eyes turned to a new generation of quarterbacks, especially those unapologetically bold, stylish, and proudly expressive. At the front of that wave, Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson. These players aren't just changing how the position is played. They're changing what a quarterback looks like. Gone are the days where QBs were expected to be silent leaders in suits and helmets. Today, they're walking brands, icons, voices of their generation both on and off the field. Shedeur Sanders, the son of Dion and the face of a rising Colorado program, doesn't just throw touchdowns, he owns the moment. Whether it's an icy watch flex or a signature celebration, he makes statements that extend past the stat sheet. Deshaun Watson? Controversies aside, his on-field charisma and dynamic style have always set him apart. His celebrations aren't just entertainment. They're a message, a declaration of presence in a league where black quarterbacks were once told to stay quiet and fit in. So when Brady criticizes those types of celebrations, it's not taken as just a generational difference. It feels personal. Because these moments aren't just about flair. They represent identity, culture, freedom. And to many fans watching, Brady's criticism didn't sound like a concern about football. It sounded like a warning to players who dare to step outside the mold. The question is, why does that freedom make people uncomfortable? And who gets to define what leadership looks like in today's NFL? The answer might say more about race, tradition, and power than it does about football. And this controversy wasn't done growing yet. To some, just about, especially for black athletes, who for years were told to keep their heads down and let their play do the talking. In that context, every end zone dance, every flex, every finger point becomes bigger than the game. It becomes cultural. When players like Shedeur Sanders do their signature moves, they're not just hyping themselves up. They're reclaiming space in a league that hasn't always welcomed self-expression from athletes who look like them. And here's the irony. When white quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers do their trademark belt celebration, It's seen as swagger, branding, leadership. But when black QBs show emotion, it's called excess or selfishness. The double standard couldn't be clearer. That's why Brady's comments hit so hard. Not just because he criticized celebrations, but because he ignored what they actually mean. For many of these players, a celebration is validation, a way to connect with fans, a moment of pride, not just for a score, but for the journey it took to get there. The battles fought behind the scenes, the pressure to represent more than just a jersey. Brushing that off as rubbish, it's more than tone deaf. It's dismissive of an entire evolution of the game and the players who've had to fight to be seen, heard, and celebrated in their own way. And once that truth started to sink in, so did the backlash. Here's the uncomfortable truth. In the NFL, not all quarterbacks are judged the same. Tom Brady's comments didn't just spark a debate about celebration. They peeled back a layer the league rarely addresses openly: race. For decades, black quarterbacks have fought for respect in a league that openly questioned their leadership, intelligence, and decision-making. Even today, those stereotypes haven't vanished. They've just evolved. When a white quarterback shows passion, he's a field general, a leader, composed. When a black quarterback does the same, he's too emotional, cocky, or a distraction. The same celebrations that are praised when performed by white players often earn criticism when done by black athletes. It's subtle, but fans, teammates, and the players themselves feel it. And Brady's words, whether intentional or not, fit right into that old, familiar mold. By calling out individualism and framing flashy celebrations as harmful, he reinforced a narrative that's long been used to keep outspoken black athletes in check. It's not just about football anymore. It's about image, about who gets to define leadership, and how that definition often excludes those who don't fit a certain mold. We saw it with Colin Kaepernick when he dared to kneel. We saw it with Cam Newton when he dabbed his way into an MVP season, then got called arrogant for it. Now, we're seeing it again, except this time, the criticism didn't come from an anonymous source or a biased reporter. It echoed these double standards. The message gets louder than ever. Here's where things start getting really complicated. Tom Brady spent 2 decades being truth is, while Brady talks about humility and respect for the game, his own career hasn't exactly been spotless. Let's not forget Deflategate, where Brady was suspended for allegedly tampering with footballs to gain an edge. Or the sideline tantrums caught on camera, slamming tablets, screaming at coaches, and berating teammates. Passion? Maybe. But if a black quarterback did the same, you already know the labels would be different. There's also the fact that Brady built a personal brand off the back of his career, launching products, media companies, even documentaries centered around his success. The same kind of self-promotion he's now criticizing in others. So what's the difference? That's the irony. Brady's making a case against self-expression from younger players, while his entire legacy is drenched in curated image and power. Maybe his problem isn't with celebrations. Maybe it's with losing control of what a quarterback is supposed to look like. As players like Shador Sanders bring boldness and personality back to the position, it challenges everything Brady stood for. Not just in terms of style, but authority. Because for the first time, the spotlight isn't on guys who followed Brady's playbook. It's on players rewriting the rules entirely. And that shift, it threatens more than just tradition. It threatens control. And as the backlash grew, it became clear Brady wasn't the only one being scrutinized anymore. The internet didn't hesitate. Within hours of Tom Brady's comments going viral, social media lit up. Fans weren't debating football. They were questioning the legacy of a player once considered untouchable. Some called it disappointing. Others went further, accusing Brady of using coded language to tear down black athletes under the disguise of football culture. The backlash was immediate and it hit hard. High-profile players, analysts, and former teammates began weighing in. Some defending Brady's view on teamwork, others calling him out for subtle gatekeeping. A few younger players, especially black quarterbacks, responded without directly naming Brady, posting cryptic messages, emojis, and subtle jabs that left no doubt about who they were addressing. One post simply read, "Let us eat. Stop policing the joy." Sports talk shows jumped in next. Debates exploded across ESPN, FS1, YouTube, and TikTok. Pundits started asking tough questions. Why do we celebrate fiery emotion in some quarterbacks but criticize it in others? Is leadership only valid when it looks like Brady? And this time, the usual defenses didn't hold. Saying it's just his opinion wasn't enough. Because Brady's voice doesn't exist in a vacuum. He's a symbol, an icon, a mold that young quarterbacks are expected to fit. When he speaks, people don't just listen. They adjust. Which is exactly why this struck such a nerve. He wasn't just criticizing a trend. He was reinforcing the same narrative that's kept expressive black athletes boxed in for years. And the message came through loud and clear. Brady's words may have started a conversation about football, but they ended up opening wounds way deeper than the game itself. Tom Brady's career is the kind legends are made of. 7 Super Bowl rings, unmatched longevity, and an aura of invincibility. For 2 decades, he was the standard. But now, in 2025, the game has changed. And the question is becoming impossible to ignore. Is Brady out of touch with the NFL's future? Today's league looks nothing like it did when Brady entered in 2000. It's younger, faster, louder, and more diverse, not just in faces, but in voices. Players aren't just athletes anymore. Quarterbacks especially are breaking the mold. Guys like Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Shedeur Sanders are proving that leadership doesn't have to be silent or stoic. It can be electric, vocal, culturally resonant. Today's QBs lead with personality, not in spite of it. Brady's idea of humiliators, personal expression, is part of their leadership. It's how they inspire, connect, and create impact beyond the scoreboard. And when Brady critiques that, even unintentionally, it suggests something deeper. That he may no longer understand the league he once ruled. The NFL is evolving, not just in how it's played, but who gets to shape its narrative. Leadership isn't one size fits all anymore. Legacy has its place, but so does progress. The field doesn't belong to one generation. It belongs to the players writing the next chapter. And if Brady can't see that, he might be remembered as someone. Tom Brady's comments triggered something much deeper, a conversation that's been bubbling under the surface of the NFL for years. One about identity, visibility, and who gets to define what it means to be a leader in today's game. Brady may have intended to defend tradition, but in doing so, he unintentionally dragged the conversation into a familiar and uncomfortable territory, where the actions of outspoken black athletes are scrutinized, labeled, and judged through a much harsher lens. He wasn't just criticizing style or personality. He was, whether he realized it or not, reinforcing the idea that leadership must only ever look like him. Quiet, unshaken, predictable, controlled. But the NFL has changed. Its players have changed. And the fans? They're demanding a league that reflects the world they live in. Diverse, expressive, and unapologetically real. Brady's words remind us that even icons aren't immune from the consequences of what they say, especially when their views feel like echoes of an outdated playbook. Now, the question isn't whether Brady's legacy is ruined. It's whether he's willing to evolve with the league he helped build, or stay stuck in a version of the game that's already moved on without him. Because in today's NFL, silencing expression isn't leadership, it's regression. And as this new generation of quarterbacks continues to rise, celebrate, and own their narratives, one thing is crystal clear. The future of football doesn't look like the past, and that's exactly the point.